Who's the person that's number one on that invitation list?
Leonardo DiCaprio.
So Leonardo DiCaprio breaks silence in p.diddy trial, revealing years of alleged psychological trauma and coercion within Diddy's circle.
Affiliated with p.diddy.
Did you thwart Johnny Diddy for his freak off?
That's why I don't be going to them puffy parties. They can hug you from the front and the back at the same time.
You need locks on the doors.
Okay, this is sounding kind of dangerous now.
Leonardo DiCaprio shocked everyone with an unexpected appearance at the courthouse, arriving quietly, but with a presence that immediately shifted the energy of the entire building. Word spread like wildfire through the hallways. DiCaprio was here, not as a spectator, but as a witness. His entrance was discreet, yet electrifying, and by the time he stepped into the courtroom, the air was thick with anticipation. The moment he walked in, all eyes locked onto him. The Oscar-winning actor, known for his commanding screen presence, looked nothing like the composed figures he often plays. Instead, he appeared tense, his eyes heavy and rimmed with red, his jaw clenched with a quiet resolve. His usual Hollywood charisma was replaced by something far more human: vulnerability. The courtroom fell silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Spectators, legal staff, and even members of the jury sat up straighter, their murmurs dying instantly. At the center of the storm sat Sean P. Diddy Combs, flanked by his legal team, visibly stunned. No one, not the press, not the defense, not even the prosecution, had expected DiCaprio to testify. His name had circulated in the background of the case, whispered in speculative reports, but few believed he would take the stand. Yet there he was, ready to speak, and his presence sent a wave of unease through the room. As DiCaprio took his place at the witness stand, the weight of his silence alone was overwhelming. The room braced for what would follow. When he finally adjusted the microphone and began to speak, what unfolded was a harrowing and emotional testimony, one that would leave the courtroom in shock and the public reeling. With a trembling voice, Leonardo DiCaprio began his testimony, his words soft but piercing, carrying an emotional weight that immediately silenced the room. "I was just a kid," he said, pausing to swallow hard, his eyes lowered. "I didn't know any better. I was naive, and he took advantage of that." A gasp escaped from somewhere in the back of the courtroom. The raw honesty in his voice pierced the solemn silence like a knife. Even the court reporter's fingers slowed as DiCaprio continued, his words heavy with pain and memory. He spoke with the hesitancy of someone reliving trauma they had tried to bury for decades, struggling to maintain composure while revealing truths that had haunted him in silence. "I was 19, maybe 20, just starting to be recognized, trying to navigate the industry, trusting people who said they wanted to help me," he said, his voice cracking. "Sean, P. Diddy, he invited me to parties, told me I'd meet the right people, that it would help my career, but it was never about helping me. It was about control." The judge leaned slightly forward. Members of the jury watched, stunned and visibly emotional. One juror covered her mouth. Another blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. "I remember thinking, this can't be real. This can't be happening," DiCaprio said, shaking his head as he wiped his face with a trembling hand. "But it was, and I didn't have the power to say no. Not back then." Throughout the testimony, Diddy stared at the table in front of him, avoiding eye contact. DiCaprio's words continued to echo across the silent courtroom, a chilling reminder of the unseen cost of fame and the predators who operate behind the glitter of celebrity life. Leonardo DiCaprio's voice quivered as he recalled the night that, in his own words, shattered everything. The event, which he had been told was a glamorous, star-studded Hollywood gathering, turned out to be something far darker, what he described in court as P. Diddy's notorious freak-off party. The term had long circulated in hushed tones in industry circles, but never before had it been described in such vivid and personal detail by someone of DiCaprio's stature. "I thought it was just another party," DiCaprio said, gripping the sides of the witness stand tightly as he spoke. "That's how it was presented. There'd be producers there, maybe some studio heads. I was told it was important to show my face, to mingle, to be seen." He paused, looking down, clearly struggling with the memory. "But what I walked into, it wasn't normal. It wasn't safe. It was predatory, and I wasn't ready for what was waiting inside that house." DiCaprio described being ushered into a dimly lit mansion where the atmosphere quickly turned from celebratory to sinister. There were people everywhere, but the energy felt off. Some were half naked, others already clearly high. Music was blasting, and Diddy was there, laughing, greeting people like a king in his palace. He testified that shortly after arriving, he was handed a drink by one of Diddy's assistants. I didn't think anything of it at the time. I took a sip, and that's the last clear memory I have. Everything after that is flashes, chaos, fear. I wasn't in control of my body anymore. According to DiCaprio, what followed were disjointed moments that have haunted him for decades. He claimed he was drugged and then molested by Diddy and other men at the party. I remember being touched, pushed, pulled, he said through tears. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I remember looking up at Diddy and he was smiling, like this was normal, like I was just a toy. The courtroom was stunned into silence. Several spectators wept openly and one juror looked visibly sick. The judge called for a brief recess, allowing DiCaprio to compose himself before continuing. When court resumed, DiCaprio emphasized how manipulated and trapped he felt. I had no idea how to react. I was surrounded by power, fame, people with influence. I was just a young actor. I kept thinking, who would believe me? His voice broke again. I didn't even believe it myself for years. He went on to describe waking up the next morning in one of the bedrooms upstairs, disoriented, partially clothed, and alone. My first instinct was to get out. I didn't even stop to ask questions. I just ran. I felt dirty, ashamed. I didn't tell anyone. DiCaprio said he buried the memory for years, suppressing it as his career skyrocketed, but it never stopped haunting him. Every time someone mentioned Diddy's name, I'd flinch. Every time I got an invitation to an exclusive event, I'd panic. That night took something from me, something I've been trying to get back ever since. His voice, though weak, carried a powerful weight as he finished this part of his testimony. People see fame and money and think that makes you untouchable. But I was touched, in the worst way, and I've carried that shame in silence. Until now. The courtroom sat frozen, the gravity of his words sinking in. For the first time, the glitzy facade surrounding one of hip-hop's most influential figures had been peeled back, revealing a much darker truth, one that Leonardo DiCaprio, with great courage and emotional pain, had brought into the light. I didn't tell anyone. I was scared of what he could do, of who he knew, of how powerful he was, Leonardo DiCaprio said, his voice cracking under the emotional weight of the memory. The courtroom was already tense from the disturbing testimony he had given about the so-called freak-off party, but now his words turned inward, exposing the psychological prison that had kept him silent for decades. As he looked toward the jury, several members shifted in their seats, visibly uncomfortable. One juror quietly dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The rest remained silent, stunned into stillness. The courtroom, packed with reporters and spectators, was so quiet you could hear the distant hum of a hallway light. DiCaprio took a moment to collect himself, then continued. Diddy wasn't just a celebrity, he said. He was, and still is, a gatekeeper in the entertainment world. He knew everyone. He had connections in Hollywood, in media, in law enforcement, in politics. He could end careers with a phone call, mine included, and I knew it. He explained how he had been warned even by people close to him to keep quiet. There was this unspoken rule, he said. You don't cross Diddy. You don't ask questions. You don't repeat what you saw. People were scared, not just for their jobs, but for their safety. He revealed that he had once tried to confide in a fellow actor, someone he considered a friend. I hinted at what had happened just to see how they'd react. They looked terrified. They said, Leo, just drop it. You don't want to make him mad. That's when I knew I was alone in this. DiCaprio described years of living in fear, constantly looking over his shoulder. It was like I was trapped in a nightmare with no way out, he said softly. I thought if I ignored it, maybe it would fade. But it didn't. It followed me into every role I played, every red carpet I walked, every interview I gave. He spoke about the psychological toll, years of anxiety, insomnia, and therapy. I had everything people think they want, fame, fortune, awards, but none of that mattered because I never felt safe. I never felt whole. The courtroom remained frozen in place. Even the judge leaned back, visibly affected by the weight of DiCaprio's words. What kept me silent wasn't just fear of Diddy, DiCaprio added. It was fear of not being believed, of being ridiculed, of being called dramatic or ungrateful or worse. He looked up and scanned the room slowly. That's the culture that allowed this to happen, and that's why it kept happening. His testimony pierced through the glitz of celebrity and revealed a darker undercurrent, one where silence was survival and truth was too dangerous to speak. But in this moment, DiCaprio chose courage over fear, finally giving voice to what he had been forced to bury. The silence that followed wasn't just respectful, it was reverent. The courtroom understood that they had just witnessed something rare, a powerful man finally breaking free from the grip of another's power and taking the first real breath of freedom. As Leonardo DiCaprio continued his emotional testimony, the courtroom saw a stark shift from the horrors of the past to the long-term psychological toll those experiences had taken on him. For the first time, the actor publicly acknowledged the extent of his mental health struggles, revealing the silent battle he'd fought for over 2 decades, one that fame, wealth, and accolades could never shield him from. "I've been in therapy for years," he admitted, his voice faint but steady. "I've tried everything: counseling, trauma work, even meditation retreats. But some things just don't go away." There was a pause as he seemed to weigh his next words carefully. "Every time I see a black SUV, I panic. That's how bad it got," he confessed, his eyes locking with the judge's for a moment. "I'd be driving through LA, going to a set or a meeting, and suddenly I'd freeze. My heart would race. My hands would sweat. All I could think was, is he watching me? Did I say something I shouldn't have?" The judge, visibly moved by the actor's vulnerability, called for a brief pause in the proceedings. Court officers quietly escorted DiCaprio to a private chamber to gather himself, while the rest of the courtroom sat in stunned silence, absorbing the full impact of what had just been revealed. When the session resumed, DiCaprio continued, detailing how the psychological wounds from that night and the years of secrecy that followed had deeply affected his personal and professional life. "I couldn't trust anyone," he said. "Relationships became impossible. I'd pull away when people got too close. I'd sabotage things. I thought I was protecting myself, but really I was just sinking further." He spoke of sleepless nights, panic attacks, and the intense fear that his truth might one day come out and destroy him. "There were nights I'd wake up gasping for air. The nightmares, they were vivid. I'd see his face, hear his laugh. It wasn't just a memory, it was like I was back there, trapped again." Despite his success, DiCaprio said he often felt like a fraud, disconnected from the world around him. "People would cheer for me on red carpets, but inside I felt hollow, like I was still that kid in that room being told I didn't matter, that I was just another piece in someone else's game." He revealed that he'd written letters to himself over the years, trying to make sense of it all, to forgive himself for staying silent. "I blamed myself for a long time," he said quietly, "for going to the party, for not fighting back, for not speaking up. But I was a kid. I know that now, and I'm saying this today because I don't want to carry that shame anymore." By sharing his deeply personal mental health journey, DiCaprio not only shed light on the long-lasting damage of abuse, but also gave a voice to countless others suffering in silence. His testimony was not just a legal statement, it was a call for compassion, accountability, and change. Throughout Leonardo DiCaprio's emotional and damning testimony, all eyes frequently drifted toward the defendant, Sean P. Diddy Combs. Normally composed and confident, Diddy appeared visibly shaken as the actor's words poured forth with disturbing clarity. This wasn't the swaggering music mogul the public was accustomed to seeing. This was a man increasingly cornered by the weight of truth. From the moment DiCaprio took the stand, Diddy's demeanor changed. He fidgeted in his seat, shifting uncomfortably, often glancing toward his legal team and whispering rapidly. As DiCaprio described the betrayal and abuse he claimed to have suffered, Diddy would shake his head slightly, sometimes muttering under his breath in disbelief or protest. But when DiCaprio locked eyes with him and said, "You destroyed a part of my innocence I can never get back," the courtroom caught a rare moment of raw reaction. Diddy leaned back in his chair abruptly, his jaw tight, his fists clenched on the arms of the chair. For a split second, his usual impassive facade cracked, revealing a storm of emotion just beneath the surface. Anger, guilt, or possibly fear. A few times, he looked as though he wanted to stand up, but his attorneys subtly placed a hand on his arm, calming him down, reminding him of the stakes. He remained silent, but his eyes were restless, darting around the room, unable to meet DiCaprio's gaze for long. The jury took note, so did the press. While DiCaprio exposed years of buried trauma, Diddy sat at the center of it all, a man no longer shielded by fame or power, now forced to face accusations that refused to be ignored. The courtroom wasn't just hearing testimony, it was watching the unraveling of a legacy. As Leonardo DiCaprio recounted the harrowing details of his experience, the emotional temperature in the courtroom reached a boiling point. The room, already tense, became heavy with disbelief and sorrow. One particularly graphic moment in DiCaprio's testimony, when he described waking up confused, disoriented, and touched by unfamiliar hands, triggered an audible cry from a woman in the gallery. Court officers quickly moved toward her as she stood and shouted, "Monsters! All of them!" She was visibly shaken and had to be escorted out of the courtroom, her voice still echoing faintly as the doors closed behind her. Several others in attendance wept quietly. A reporter seated near the front could be seen wiping tears from her notebook. Legal assistants, typically stoic, exchanged glances of concern and unease. Even members of the jury, expected to maintain a neutral demeanor, found it nearly impossible to mask their reactions. One juror sat with their hands clenched tightly, lips pressed together. Another dabbed at watery eyes with the sleeve of their jacket. The atmosphere was no longer that of a typical courtroom. It felt more like a collective reckoning. Every word DiCaprio spoke peeled back another layer of silence surrounding the allegations against Diddy. What had once been whispered in tabloids or dismissed as rumors was now being laid bare in sworn testimony. The judge called for extra security presence as the emotional toll on spectators became more pronounced. The energy in the room was not just one of sympathy, it was of awakening. The truth, long buried beneath celebrity and status, was finally confronting everyone head-on, and it was impossible to look away. As Leonardo DiCaprio's explosive testimony made headlines around the world, the reaction from Hollywood was swift, emotional, and deeply divided. Within hours, social media platforms were flooded with messages of support, speculation, and concern. Prominent actors, producers, and insiders began to speak out, some cautiously, others forcefully, grappling with the implications of what many now believe could be a scandal far deeper than anyone imagined. A prominent studio executive who asked to remain anonymous in a statement to the press warned, "We've only scratched the surface. More will come out. This is just the beginning." The comment, which quickly went viral, ignited a firestorm of conversation across the entertainment industry. Rumors began to circulate that other high-profile names may soon be linked to similar incidents involving the so-called freak-off parties. Actors who had worked with DiCaprio over the years voiced their support. Oscar-winning actress Cate Blanchett posted on Instagram, "Leonardo's courage is beyond words. No one should ever have to carry something like this alone. The truth must be heard, no matter how powerful the accused." Actor Mark Ruffalo tweeted, "What we're witnessing is bravery in its purest form. I stand with Leo." Yet not everyone reacted so openly. Some celebrities and industry figures remained conspicuously silent. A few, including artists who have worked closely with Diddy in the past, declined to comment when approached by reporters. This silence was interpreted by some as fear of being implicated, or fear of upsetting the powerful forces that still hold sway in the industry. The Screen Actors Guild, SAG-AFTRA, issued a brief but pointed statement. "We support the right of all artists to speak their truth. We will continue to advocate for safe environments within the industry." As the ripple effects of DiCaprio's testimony spread, Hollywood found itself at a crossroads. What began as one man's painful reckoning was quickly becoming a collective moment of truth for an industry long accused of looking the other way. Conversations that were once whispered behind closed doors were now erupting in the open, and the demand for accountability was growing louder by the minute. For many, DiCaprio's words were not just a testimony, they were a spark. And Hollywood, for better or worse, was about to catch fire. Leonardo DiCaprio's deeply emotional and explicit testimony has sent shockwaves far beyond the courtroom, and legal experts are already weighing in on its potential impact. Many are calling it a turning point in the case against Sean P. Diddy Combs, shifting the narrative from one of speculation and hearsay to direct, personal allegations from one of the most recognizable figures in Hollywood. This changes the entire tone of this case, from rumors to lived experience, stated former federal prosecutor Dana Levins. When someone of DiCaprio's stature comes forward with a detailed account like this, it not only lends credibility to the charges, it makes them real. The jury sees it, feels it, and internalizes it in a way that's hard to ignore. Legal analysts point to the emotional weight of DiCaprio's testimony as a potentially decisive factor. Jurors who are instructed to remain impartial are also human. The visible distress, the specificity of his recollections, and the raw honesty he delivered are all elements that could sway opinions, even subtly, over the course of the trial. Criminal defense attorney Marcus Baines observed, "This isn't just a celebrity giving an opinion. This is a first-hand witness detailing events under oath. And what's more, it's a witness who has nothing to gain from coming forward and arguably a lot to lose. That makes it incredibly compelling." There are also broader legal implications. DiCaprio's testimony may pave the way for additional witnesses to come forward, people who may have previously felt silenced by fear or power dynamics. Already, rumors suggest that prosecutors may be reaching out to others who attended similar events hosted by Diddy, building a wider case of pattern and behavior. If the prosecution can establish that this wasn't a one-time incident but part of a repeated pattern of abuse and coercion, DiCaprio's testimony becomes a keystone, Baines added. It opens the floodgates. Furthermore, legal experts say this moment could affect plea negotiations, if any are on the table. The overwhelming media coverage and public response may place pressure on both sides to consider settlements or, conversely, embolden the prosecution to pursue harsher penalties with more confidence. Whatever the outcome, one thing is certain. DiCaprio's words have irreversibly shaped the trajectory of the trial and potentially the legal landscape for celebrity accountability in years to come. As Leonardo DiCaprio stepped down from the witness stand, escorted by security, the courtroom remained frozen in an almost sacred silence. The air was thick with the weight of what had just transpired. Not a whisper, not a shuffle, just stillness, as each person in the room tried to process the revelations they had witnessed. Even the hum of fluorescent lights seemed louder in the absence of speech. The A-list actor, known more for his commanding performances on screen than for public vulnerability, had laid bare a trauma so personal and profound that it left not only legal professionals and spectators shaken, but also sent shockwaves beyond the walls of the courthouse. DiCaprio did not look back as he exited. His shoulders were hunched, his steps slow and heavy. It was not the walk of a celebrity, but of a survivor leaving behind a battlefield. At the defense table, Sean P.Diddy Combs sat unmoving. His face, once etched with disbelief and indignation, now appeared more unreadable, almost pale. Though he continues to firmly deny all allegations, the power of DiCaprio's testimony marked a pivotal shift. Legal observers noted a subtle change in Diddy's legal team, who appeared less animated, their notes fewer, their eyes fixed straight ahead. Outside the courthouse, media vans buzzed to life, reporters scrambling to summarize what many were calling the most powerful day of the trial thus far. Social media exploded with hashtags demanding justice and accountability. Public opinion, already wavering, now seemed to sway more definitively. For those in attendance, the silence that followed DiCaprio's testimony wasn't just emotional, it was historical. Something had changed. This wasn't merely a case about celebrity misconduct anymore. It had become a symbol of an industry and perhaps a society reckoning with its darkest corners. While the legal process is far from over and the presumption of innocence remains for Diddy, the courtroom had been irreversibly transformed. And for many, so had the narrative. As one observer quietly said, this wasn't just testimony, it was a turning point. Whether that turning point leads to justice, reform, or further revelations remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the echoes of DiCaprio's words will linger in that courtroom and in the public conscience for a long time to come.